Hey guys, it's Ellen Brock, novel editor. Today I'm going to talk about editing characters, especially the protagonist, and how you can make them stronger. Often writers don't know how to strengthen their characters through the editing process. They might see things that they don't like, or they feel like the emotions aren't hitting, or their characters' personalities aren't very strong, but they don't know how to fix that, or why it's happening, or how to improve it. So today I'm going to go over some tips, some things to look for so that you can strengthen your characters, especially your protagonist, to make your novel as strong as possible. So tip number one is to look at the character arc. If you're not sure what your character arc is, or you're not sure what message your character learns or what flaw they overcome, I recommend brainstorming that and figuring out the answer as early in the editing process as possible, because the character arc does impact what happens in the novel. Sometimes the problem with the character arc is that the writer's relying on telling. They're stating that the character feels a certain way, and then at the end of the novel they change the way that they feel, and it's all introspective, but it's not affecting what the character does. The key to making the character arc work is that the character needs to do something different as a result of overcoming their flaw or their false belief or whatever is getting in their way emotionally. So in the beginning, we should see your character making a mistake or getting punished for falling prey to their flaw or their false belief. So they do something, they take some sort of action that is in line with their false belief or flaw, and that causes them to become punished. Then during the climax, we should see that character having overcome that flaw in some way, taking some sort of action that demonstrates that they're shedding that flaw. So make sure that the character arc is present in the sense that it actually impacts the decisions the character makes, and it impacts the flow of the story and what occurs. Tip number two is to make sure your protagonist is qualified to be the protagonist of your story. In the vast majority of stories, in order for the protagonist to feel like the proper lead and the proper main character, they need to either have the most at stake of all the characters, or they need to be the most qualified to solve the problem of all the characters. So you can also have both of these conditions met. You can have a character who has the most to lose of all the characters, and also is the most qualified to solve the problem, but just one should be sufficient so that it's clear why you've chosen this character as the protagonist. One thing that can hurt the reader's ability to empathize with your protagonist or to really connect with them is if you have side characters that are completely stealing the show because they have more at stake or because they're more talented. It's not necessary for the protagonist to have more at stake and to be more qualified, but there should be one condition met or the other. So if you have the other characters who are all equally capable of solving the problem and they all have the same things at stake or similar things at stake, it can be very difficult to position the protagonist as the lead of the story and to make the reader feel like it makes sense that this person is in charge and that this is the person that's leading the story. And you don't want the reader wishing that a different character were the lead or wishing they could spend more time with a different character. You want to make that strong attachment to the protagonist. Tip number three is to make sure what the protagonist has at stake is near and dear to their heart. Their stakes need to be the most important thing in their life. The character decides the importance of the stakes. What's important to one person might not be important to somebody else. For one person, their career might be the absolute worst thing they could ever lose. It's so important to them, and somebody else might not really care about their career at all. So it's entirely based on what the character values. So make sure what your character has at stake is of extreme value to them so that the reader can really empathize and worry about them losing that thing that's at stake. Tip number four is make sure your character has a goal. Make sure they're trying to achieve something. In previous videos, I talked about the midpoint and how at that point the character becomes more proactive and they start trying to make things happen. If your character never becomes proactive and never tries to make something happen, it's going to be very difficult to create a satisfying ending. The ending is the character achieving or failing at what they were trying to achieve, and that can't happen if the character never starts trying to achieve something in the first place. If your character never becomes proactive, it's going to be very hard for the reader to connect and empathize with them, because the character who's not proactive tends to be boring. So make sure your character does want something, has a goal, and they're going out towards that goal. If they spend the whole novel running away and trying to avoid problems and never trying to obtain anything or achieve anything, it can make it more difficult to establish empathy, and it can make the character less likable and maybe boring. Tip number 5 is to make sure your character's personality traits are clear. I recommend that you make a list of a few traits that are very important, maybe 2 or 3 really big traits that you want the reader to pick up on. Write them down, think about that, and look at your novel and see, have you actually demonstrated those traits? Has the character done things or taken actions or made decisions that are in alignment with those traits? Sometimes we will think that we've conveyed a character's personality when really we haven't. And usually that happens because the personality trait isn't actually affecting anything the character is doing. It might affect incidental reactions, but it's not really relevant to the decisions the character is making or how they're relating to other people. So consider how you're demonstrating those traits. I've recommended in previous videos, and I'll recommend again, that you have someone read the first chapter or 2 of your novel without any explanation of what they're supposed to be experiencing or feeling, and then ask that person, what do you think the personality is of this character? This can be really enlightening, and you might find that your personality traits are not coming across at all the way that you wanted them to, and that your character is seeming very different from what you intended. I hope this video helped you, that it gave you some ideas of how to strengthen your characters. This is the last video of my novel bootcamp series. I had a great time making this series of videos. I will try not to disappear again. I will have to be gone for a while because I have to catch up on my regular editing work, but I had a great time. I will try not to disappear, and I really appreciate you all watching and liking and sharing the videos. Happy writing, guys.